Welcome back, everybody. Eric here. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I've got some breaking 2A news for you here, something that I feel is pretty important to kind of shake down on. I heard this through various YouTube channels. Folks have been talking about it, and I finally got down here to cut a little piece and give some of my thoughts on this as well. It has to do with a new Supreme Court case that is coming down the pipeline that is probably going to put a complete stop to Chevron deference and removing that regulatory, let's just say, loophole that allows these agencies to regulate things through some form of fiat and not actually going through Congress, and basically getting to bypass Congress. That could end. And that has pretty important connotations for everything going on in the 2A world. Why is this 2A news? Because Chevron deference is the kind of, thing that they use to get things like the frame and receiver rule, the bump stock ban, the brace ban, and pretty much any other type of ban of that sort that you would ever see on technology related to 2A or guns or whatever. You are certainly going to see Chevron deference used and abused in order for them to have their way. With completely bypassing Congress, this could end all of that. So we're going to get into this, and this comes straight from the SCOTUS blog. I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts really quick. Mrs. Amy Howe wrote this, okay? Nearly 40 years ago in Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council, the Supreme Court ruled that courts should not defer to a federal agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute as long as that interpretation is reasonable. On Monday, the Supreme Court agreed to reconsider its ruling in Chevron. The question comes to the court in a case brought by a group of commercial fishing companies, of all things, fishermen, right? Holy crap, here we go. They challenged a rule issued by the National Marine Fisheries Service that requires the fishing industry to pay for the costs of observers who monitor compliance with fishery management plans. Relying on Chevron, a divided panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit rejected the company's challenge to the rule. Judge Judith Rogers explained that although federal fishery law makes clear that the government can require fishing boats to carry monitors, it does not specifically address who must pay for those monitors. Because the NMFS's interpretation of federal fishery law as authorizing industry-funded monitors was a reasonable one, Rogers concluded, the court should defer to that interpretation. The fishing companies came to the Supreme Court in November asking the justices both to weigh in on their challenge to the rule and to overrule Chevron, or, the petition suggested, clarify that when a law does not address controversial powers expressly but narrowly granted somewhere else in the statute, there is no ambiguity in the statute and therefore no deference is required. After considering the case at 5 consecutive conferences, the justices agreed to take up only the second question on the Chevron doctrine. Some members of the court's conservative majority have been critical of the Chevron doctrine in recent years. Justice Clarence Thomas has been among the doctrine's most vocal critics, that Chevron deference rests the court's the ultimate interpretive authority to say what the law is and hands it over to the executive branch. He has been joined by Justice Neil Gorsuch, I probably mispronounced that name, I apologize greatly, who, in a dissent from the denial of review last fall, argued that the court should acknowledge forthrightly that Chevron did not undo and could not have undone the judicial duty to provide an independent judgment of the law's meaning in the cases that come before the nation's court. So it goes on to discuss some other cases that are going to make it onto the list. I'm not going to go through all of those details because I mainly wanted to cover the fishery one. It says the justices' next regulatory scheduled private conference is Thursday, May 11th, with orders from that conference expected on May 15th, and that's Monday, May 15th. This article was originally published at Ho on the court. I guess that's, or How on the court. Anyway, I just want to get that straight from the SCOTUS blog. So, this could absolutely put a stop to Chevron deference. Even though this is involved with fisheries and everything like that, the regulatory bodies that use Chevron deference are far-reaching. I mean, you're talking any law enforcement or law enforcement agency, right? You could consider the FBI, any alphabet agency that's a regulatory type authority, the ATF, the EPA, all of those sorts of organizations, right? That could just, again, with great ambiguity, just say, well, it's what we say it is because we say it is. And that's exactly what we're dealing with the ATF right now, right? Trump said, I'm going to use executive order to, ban bump stocks. And the ATF is like, all right, well, we'll ban bump stocks. I mean, if you're saying that they're machine guns, then we're just going to say they're machine guns. And maybe even then that they knew that this was going to sort out in court. Don't get too excited just yet, though. This thing is going to probably drag out for a while. The Supreme Court won't actually, hear the case until I think around the fall. And then, of course, we won't have an actual decision, and, they'll release all of their findings and make a decision. We'll probably know something around probably January or February of next year. Okay, so it's going to be a while, but this is something we all need to be following closely, because this could absolutely put a stopper in Chevron deference, which would then also leave, well, not that the bump stock situation, the brace situation are not already on extremely slippery legal territory already. We already saw that the Fifth and Sixth Circuit courts have shot down the bump stock ban already, and that situation, the Cargill v. Garland, is probably the most famous case that people are familiar with when it comes to the bump stock case out of the Fifth Circuit there. And I've had Michael Cargill on the channel several times. He is a great dude, and we've done some updates for y'all and kind of explained it. But that's the case most people are familiar with. But recently in the Sixth Circuit Court, it was also shot down. But that particular, the Cargill v. Garland, is the one that is probably going to wind up going to the Supreme Court the way it's looking. So, between that case and then now this fisheries case, there are multiple fronts under which people are complaining about the abuse of Chevron deference. I don't remember which justice it was. It may have actually been Justice Thomas that mentioned that, the Wright Supreme Court case had not really came along yet for them to put a stopper in Chevron deference, that they were kind of waiting on the right case. And I don't think it's necessarily that they didn't want to hear a Second Amendment case, but in the Supreme Court, the amount of cases that we can actually lean on for, interpretive, let's just say legal standing, right, are kind of limited, right? We've got the Heller decision, we've got the Bruin decision, but there's not a heck of a lot of things that we can really lean on. So anything we can get that's 2A related in the Supreme Court is very, very important. The Supreme Court is the law of the land, like they're the highest court in the land. So if the Supreme Court is on your side and you have justices that interpret the Constitution fairly and as it's worded, that is one of the best checks and balances for keeping these people in order, right? I wonder, with the recent, congressional hearing with the ATF that occurred this last week, I really do wonder what will actually happen, what will come of it. Congress does have the power of the purse. They could defund the ATF. Right? There's a lot of things that can happen in that regard. A lot of times those congressional hearings are just lip service. And that's what really ticks me off about it. It's like they're just giving lip service to make it look like, something's going to happen. But will something really happen? Heck, who knows? And at the end of the day, will Congress act and reel in the ATF in any sort of way? Will they defund the organization and hold their money from them? Probably not. I mean, who knows, right? But the one thing we do have going for us is that we have a pretty decent Supreme Court right now that seems to be willing to want to hear more things related to the Second Amendment. And we have the opportunity right here to gain back a lot of ground. And we're talking about ground that has been stolen from us for over 100 years, right? These are long-standing infringements. Right? When Bruin talks about long-standing legal precedents, or let's just say historical text traditions and all the sort of stuff like the Bruin decision reads, I'm not reading that exactly as it's worded, but I'm just giving you my interpretation. Right? We're talking long-standing infringements. We're talking infringements that have been in place for over 100 years, sometimes even longer than that, right? So we could start to dial back on these long-standing infringements. And these Supreme Court cases are very instrumental in giving us the legal firepower we need to go after this stuff. And, we fight it out in the courts. And gosh, it's just, what an exciting time to be alive as a gun owner. And, many of us, we've grown up our entire lives knowing things as being the way that they are. And, maybe always assuming that things would never, come our way again, that we'll never gain back ground that's been lost, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment, right? You want to talk about, dialing back on a gun law. Yeah. Forget that, right? Like it can be tough. Like once you lose ground, when you concede ground to the anti-gunners, it's very, very, very difficult to get it back. And to be fair, under our current administration, or let's just say our current shakedown in terms of the House and the Senate and everything and the amount of seats that are in there, I mean, it's going to be really hard for any type of gun control to get passed at the federal level. So that's why, hey, if we have an opportunity to, for the Supreme Court to make things go our way a little bit better, that's an opportunity that we certainly need to take. In fact, remember, not too long ago, right, they were talking about, oh, we need to pack the Supreme Court. We need to put more Supreme Court justices in there. Like they're always trying to, kind of weigh the game against, to try to take every advantage they can to kind of rig the game, right? They would probably love to add 10 Supreme Court justice seats if they could. Yeah, of course, if they could let Biden's handlers pick, let's put 10 liberal, extreme, far left Supreme Court justices in and pack the Supreme Court. They would love to pack the Supreme Court. Anyway, I digress. I could go on further, but I know Joe Manchin did not want to allow them to pack the Supreme Court because he saw strategically the importance of not allowing them to do that, because if you nuke the filibuster, then what's going to happen the next time there's a decent majority of Republicans in the House and Senate, and maybe even the presidency, right? They're going to nuke the filibuster. And then it's a pendulum that it's a dangerous thing to swing back and forth. So at least Manchin, saw the strategy in not allowing the Democrats to nuke the filibuster in order to pack the Supreme Court. I know that's nerdy stuff, but anyway, it's fascinating to see the strategies that some of these politicians actually do consider pretty strongly when it comes to these types of things. So anyway, this is great news, and I wanted to share it, and thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you've all had a wonderful day, a wonderful week. Hang in there. It's going to be okay. This is just one cog in a very, very large wheel, and I appreciate you listening to me. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for tuning in. Many more videos on the way. We'll see you soon.